My name is Emma. I'm 26 years old. And last Christmas, a single sentence turned my entire childhood upside down. For as long as I can remember, I existed quietly on the edges of my own family. I was present, but rarely noticed. My mother could spend an entire evening unpacking my brother's newest ambitions and never once paused to ask how I was really doing. I became familiar with the sound of my own silence, doing homework alone at the kitchen table while praise and attention flowed effortlessly toward him. Over time, invisibility stopped feeling temporary. It felt permanent. Until that night. Christmas dinner looked the way it always did. The table was crowded with food, the windows glowing with blinking lights, the air heavy with routine. My mother leaned toward my brother, fully engaged, laughing as he talked about another business idea. She promised support, connections, whatever he needed. I sat there too, quietly cutting my food, careful not to interrupt the rhythm. Then my brother glanced at me with that familiar smirk, the one he's worn since childhood, and asked if I was still wasting my time on that worthless little company of mine. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just shrugged, the way you do when the weather changes, and said I'd sold it. The room froze. He chuckled, dismissive as ever, and asked how much that a worthless thing could possibly be worth. The air quotes were deliberate. I met his eyes and answered calmly, $150 million. Everything stopped. His confidence collapsed in an instant. My mother's face drained of color. Her fork slipped from her fingers and clattered against the plate. In that quiet moment, years of being overlooked didn't fall on me anymore. They landed where they belonged. If you're wondering how a daughter her own mother had dismissed for decades ended up dropping a $150 million truth bomb at a Christmas table, and what that moment quietly shattered afterward, stay with me. I wasn't always the woman who could say something like that without raising her voice. At 8 years old, I was just a shy kid hovering in the kitchen doorway, holding a scratched plastic cup while my brother's 13th birthday unfolded like a royal ceremony. His name is Alex. He's 5 years older than me, and from the start, he was the center of everything. That year, my mother, Karen, rolled a brand new mountain bike into our suburban Seattle backyard. It sparkled in the sun. Neighbors applauded. Kids cheered. Someone shouted that Alex was destined for greatness. My mom wrapped him in a hug so tight it looked like she might lose him if she let go, whispering how proud she was. I stood a few steps back in a faded thrift store shirt. No one asked me to join the photos. Alex's birthdays were events, balloons, backyard parties, towering cakes, entire weekends revolving around him. Mine were quieter. A cheap cake from Costco, a brief apology from my mom about how busy she was. When Alex graduated, he went to Disneyland. When I did, there was a card from the drugstore and some cash left on the counter. When school started, my mom fought relentlessly to get Alex into a private academy. He wore crisp uniforms, had new shoes, tutors, music lessons, expensive summer programs. I went to the local public school with chipped paint and outdated books. When I asked why, my mom would smile and tell me Alex needed extra stimulation. He was special. He had potential. And I'd be fine. At first, it sounded comforting. Over time, you'll be fine began to sound like we don't need to try. My dad worked long hours at a bank and rarely challenged her decisions. In our house, there was an unspoken order. Alex at the center. My mom orbiting him. My dad drifting on the sidelines. And me, safe as long as I didn't ask for much. By my early teens, I stopped asking altogether. I stopped questioning why Alex always had more. I stopped celebrating my own achievements because no one had time to notice. If I needed something, it was a burden. If Alex needed something, it was a priority. So I learned independence early. I taught myself to cook by watching videos online because I didn't want to ask for money. I took a dishwashing job at a nearby cafe, saving every tip in a jar hidden in my closet. That jar eventually became my first used laptop. I began collecting memories, not out of bitterness, but as reminders. Reasons to never rely on anyone else. At dinner, conversations revolved around Alex's scores, games, and future. I sat there like an extra chair. Present, but irrelevant. Somewhere along the way, something shifted inside me. I stopped trying to be seen and started planning a life that didn't depend on being chosen. Those quiet years weren't empty. They were building something. Fuel. Focus. Direction. College was supposed to be my reset. I earned a partial scholarship to the University of Washington for computer science. When the acceptance email arrived, I read it 3 times just to be sure. My mom glanced at the screen, smiled briefly, and asked if I could help her proofread an email for Alex. A week later, Alex got into Stanford. The house exploded with celebration. Relatives visited. Champagne popped. My mom cried as she told everyone her son would change the world. When I left for UW, she hugged me at the curb, told me she was proud, and drove off quickly, already late for something else. That's how this karma story really began. Quietly. Invisibly. One ignored daughter building a future no one thought to ask about. And sometimes, the most powerful revenge story isn't loud at all. It's simply becoming undeniable and finally being seen, even if it's too late for apologies. When Alex left for Stanford, my mother flew out with him. She helped set up his dorm room, fluffed pillows, hung photos, and documented every moment in a Facebook album filled with pride. My own move-in day was quieter. 2 suitcases. A used comforter I'd paid for myself. No photos. No posts. I lived in a cramped apartment near campus with 2 roommates, the kind of place where walls felt optional and privacy was a rumor. My scholarship helped, but it didn't cover everything. So I worked. A lot. I took a part-time job at a Starbucks a few blocks away, waking up at 4:30 every morning, tying on a green apron, misspelling names on cups, then sprinting to lectures with dried coffee on my sleeves. Algorithms. Data structures. Long days that blurred together. Between classes, I camped out in the library with my battered second-hand laptop, watching free coding videos because the textbooks cost more than my rent. While others joined clubs and went out at night, I stayed in and learned how to build simple apps. I didn't feel sorry for myself. There was something quietly satisfying about knowing every small step forward was mine alone. The idea that changed everything didn't arrive with fireworks. It came through complaints. Everyone around me was exhausted. Friends pulled all-nighters, lived on vending machine food, skipped workouts, then wondered why they felt hollow and drained. One roommate joked that she wished something would just tell her when to drink water and stand up. One afternoon, sitting at a sticky cafe table between shifts, something clicked. What if there was a simple app that tracked the basics, sleep, movement, food, and nudged people gently, without guilt or noise? That same day, I started sketching screens in a cheap notebook. Soft graphs for sleep. Color-coded bars for workouts. Reminders that felt like friendly texts instead of alarms. I called it Health Track. Not because it was brilliant, but because every better name was taken, and the domain was still available. My nights became a pattern. Late labs. Instant noodles. Coding until 2 in the morning. The first version was rough, but it worked. You could log meals, workouts, water, and see your week laid out honestly. I shared it with a few friends and asked them not to be kind. They weren't. They pointed out everything wrong. The buttons. The reminders. The ugly charts. It hurt, but I fixed every complaint. Slowly, the app spread. A classmate told her boyfriend. He told his friends. Someone left a random positive review that made me cry in the bathroom at work. When HealthTrack made its first $500 from in-app ads, I stared at the number like it might disappear. It wasn't much, but it was more than my family had ever put into me. I used it to buy a slightly better laptop so I could work faster. Around then, Alex would call from Stanford, talking about parties and networking and how crazy the tech scene was. My mom gushed about his future, about the doors opening for him. One night, I tried to tell her about HealthTrack. I mentioned the users. The growth. The fact that people were actually using something I built. She paused. Said, "That's nice, sweetie." Then launched straight into a story about Alex's professor and a possible internship. I sat there listening to her talk about hypothetical opportunities while my very real app quietly installed itself on strangers' phones. After that, I stopped bringing it up. I let her believe I was just getting by. I kept going anyway. I studied during breaks, scribbled code on napkins, read documentation on my phone while waiting for the bus. At the campus gym, I watched people glance at their phones between sets and imagined HealthTrack sitting there, doing its job. I wasn't thinking about revenge. I wasn't even thinking about money yet. I was chasing that small electric feeling that came every time someone said, "This actually helps me." Those ignored calls and late nights were planting roots. And roots don't ask permission before they grow. I graduated early, not out of ambition, but necessity. Extra credits were cheaper than another year of tuition. While my classmates planned gap years, I signed a lease on a tiny office in Seattle's tech district. Gray building. Flickering lights. A view of a parking lot. To me, it felt like a kingdom. I incorporated the company, opened a business account, and moved my life into that room. 2 mismatched desks. A Craigslist couch. My days tightened further, mornings for support emails, afternoons for features, nights teaching myself marketing from free podcasts. I answered every review. Messaged users who quit. Hired a designer just to make the app look less homemade. Slowly, the numbers shifted. Downloads grew. People shared progress screenshots. A local trainer asked to recommend HealthTrack. Then a gym wanted a custom onboarding message. I said yes to everything. I added a simple premium tier. Nothing flashy. When annual subscription revenue hit $50,000, the room tilted. It wasn't freedom money, but it was real. I hired 2 junior developers. People like me. We worked out of that tiny office, fueled by cheap coffee and takeout, pushing updates every week. Around that time, Alex's Stanford dream cracked. His startup burned through $100,000 of my mother's money and collapsed. He moved back home. My mom called me crying about how unfair life was to him. She barely asked about me. When she did, it was vague. "That app thing is still going, right?" I kept my answers short. While Alex worked retail and talked about his comeback, I negotiated partnerships. Gyms. Then an insurance company. I still drove an old Toyota, still wore worn-out sneakers. From the outside, nothing looked different. Inside, everything was shifting. Then an email arrived from a business development director at a major tech company. They wanted to discuss strategic options. I walked into the meeting in my only decent blazer, hands sweating. They offered $50 million. For a moment, I imagined calling my mom. Imagined her saying she'd always believed in me. Then I heard the rest. Full control. Aggressive monetization. Turning trust into pressure. It felt wrong. I said no. That refusal changed everything. A health-focused venture firm reached out. They didn't want to buy me. They wanted to help me grow. I negotiated hard and took $8 million, enough to scale, not enough to lose myself. We opened another office. Hired more engineers. Expanded mental health tools. Integrated with wearables. HealthTrack wasn't loud. It was steady. A quiet karma story unfolding in real time. And without realizing it, I was already far beyond the little box my family had built for me. We passed a milestone I never allowed myself to imagine. The app crossed 7 figures in active users. Revenue followed, swelling into numbers that felt abstract even as I signed off on them. By 25, I put my name on a modest penthouse overlooking the water in Seattle. Nothing extravagant, clean lines, wide windows, furniture from IKEA, a few plants I kept forgetting to water. I still drove the same tired car. I still showed up to work in hoodies. But my world had quietly expanded far beyond survival. The deal that finally mattered didn't arrive wrapped in buzzwords or Silicon Valley hype. It came from a massive healthcare organization with an unglamorous mission: prevention. They didn't want to strip the soul out of what I'd built. They wanted the team, the culture, the trust users had given us, and they wanted scale. Their number landed softly but heavily: $150 million. Negotiations stretched on for months. My days dissolved into legal language, video calls, spreadsheets that made my teenage self dizzy. When I signed the final documents, I walked out of the room feeling strangely hollow. After taxes, after taking care of my team, after every fee and obligation, I was left with just under $90 million. $90 million more than anyone, including me, had ever expected. I didn't call my mother. I booked an appointment with a therapist instead. In a small, quiet office, I finally said the words I'd swallowed my entire life. I talked about being overlooked. About being the "you'll be fine" child. The one whose milestones were brushed aside while someone else was rescued over and over again. We unpacked birthdays, achievements, moments where I learned to disappear. I thought I'd feel victorious. Mostly, I felt exhausted. Weeks turned into months. I began giving back, quietly, especially to mental health programs for women. Somewhere along the way, a realization settled in: I didn't need applause from my family anymore. Their approval had lost its power long ago. But I still wanted closure. Not revenge in some dramatic, movie scene way. I didn't want to throw money at anyone or demand recognition. I wanted to know, purely for myself, what it would feel like to walk back into that house as the woman they never bothered to truly see. Christmas approached, and for the first time in years, I searched for flights to Seattle. My therapist encouraged it, not because my family had earned my presence, but because she wanted me to witness the contrast. Treat it like observation, she said. Not reconciliation. You're not going back to receive anything. You're going back to notice. That framing stayed with me when I booked the flight from Portland. I could have driven. But flying felt symbolic. I was returning to the city I grew up in as the founder who had just sold her company for $150 million, and no one there knew it. I didn't tell my mom about the sale. I simply texted that I was available this year if she still wanted me for Christmas. Her response came instantly. Too instantly. Warm. Cheerful. She mentioned Alex would be there too. Just like old times, she added, a heart emoji tacked on at the end. That part made me pause. I booked a hotel near the airport instead of staying at the house. That choice alone felt like drawing a boundary in permanent ink. For years, I'd slept on that sagging twin bed in my childhood room, surrounded by peeling posters and borrowed books. This time, I wanted walls that belonged to me. I landed on Christmas Eve under a heavy gray sky. Seattle smelled the same: wet pavement, cold air. At the hotel, I dropped my bag and stood still for a moment, taking in the neutral room. No history. No echoes. Just quiet. The next day, I drove a rental car to my mother's house. The neighborhood felt smaller than I remembered. Same cracked sidewalks. Same sad little park at the corner. Her house still wore its faded blue paint. Plastic reindeer guarded the lawn, one antler bent. My heart beat faster as I climbed the steps, not from fear, but from something closer to stage nerves. The door opened before I knocked. My mother stood there in an apron dusted with flour, cheeks flushed from the oven, the scent of roasting turkey spilling out behind her. For a split second, I glimpsed the version of her I used to run toward with drawings and report cards. Then it faded. She hugged me briefly, stepping back to scan my coat, my shoes, my face, as if assessing a guest. She commented on how grown-up I looked and asked about work. Still doing your computer stuff? I nodded. Still doing my computer stuff. That seemed sufficient. She immediately shifted into updates about Alex, how much better he was doing, how exciting his new idea sounded, how proud she was. The familiar glow returned to her eyes. Inside, the house smelled like sugar and soap. The same artificial tree stood in the corner, heavy with old ornaments. Frames lined the walls, Alex in football gear. Alex at Stanford. Alex in a suit. I searched without meaning to. There wasn't a single photo of me. One picture caught my eye, Alex on his new bike, my mother beaming beside him. I was there too, barely. Cropped. Blurred. Half gone. She called Alex from the living room. He muted the TV, stood up, and looked me over with that same crooked smile. He made a comment about my coding life, about being buried in some little app, about my personal life. My mom watched, waiting for me to deflect like I always had. I didn't. I smiled and greeted him calmly. In the kitchen, my mother handed me a towel without hesitation. The rolls snapped back into place effortlessly. She poured wine for Alex. Then for herself. For me, she gestured toward the sink. It was a small thing. But it held everything. I chopped vegetables while they talked about his plans, about how she was going to help him make it work this time. No one asked about my life. I noticed, and I didn't ache. I was observing. When dinner was ready, we sat the way we always had. Same positions. Same hierarchy. Alex at the center. Me off to the side. But this time, I wasn't there to fade. I was there to see exactly what happened when the quiet daughter finally chose to exist. Dinner began as it always had, with all attention flowing in one direction. She handed him the mashed potatoes first, laughed at every half-hearted joke he made, and leaned in like his latest venture was already a headline. He rambled about an online sports gear business, how the market was ripe, how he just needed a little seed money to get rolling. My mom nodded along, eyes sparkling, and of course, she expected me to say, yes, I'll help. That familiar script, the push for him, the cheerleading, the invisible daughter in the background, was playing out exactly as I'd seen 1,000 times before. I took a calm sip of water, keeping my expression unreadable. They jumped from his business plan to his gym routine to a story about a guy almost signed to the NFL. I could have been a chair for all the notice I received. Finally, my mom glanced at me, her tone the same one she used with telemarketers. So, Emma, she asked, slicing into her turkey, you're still working on that app of yours? I felt the weight of the moment hover, just out of reach. I could have said so much right then. Instead, I shrugged. Yeah, still working on it. Her relief was palpable. As long as I managed to cover my bills, that was all that mattered. Alex swirled his wine, smirked, and teased, come on, Mom. She's fine. Just her little project. That look, condescending, familiar, hit me straight in the chest. Worthless, he implied. I didn't flinch. I didn't snap. I looked him dead in the eye and said, casually, actually, I sold my company. The room went silent. So quiet I could hear the fridge humming in the kitchen. My mother froze mid-forklift. Alex let out a short laugh. What? He said. You sold it? He did the air quotes, the same way he had as a child, belittling my little coding hobby. To a healthcare group, I said evenly. They bought HealthTrack. Saying the name aloud in that house, after years of invisibility, felt surreal, like introducing a stranger to a family that had pretended I didn't exist. Alex laughed derisively. Okay, so what did you get? A couple $100,000? Enough to move out of your shoebox apartment? His face burned red, half from wine, half from realizing I might have actually done something real. I met his eyes, letting the tension stretch, and then said, steady and deliberate, $150 million. His jaw dropped. Not figuratively, literally. The fork slipped from my mother's hand, clattering onto her plate. Her face went pale almost instantly. The silence stretched before everything erupted. That's not funny, Emma, my mother whispered. You're lying. You're not that smart, Alex barked. Nobody pays that much for some stupid phone app. I pulled out my phone, turned the screen toward them. My banking app. The balance stared back at them. After taxes. After paying my team. After everything. They leaned in, eyes wide. Alex grabbed the phone, scrolling desperately, trying to find some trick. When there wasn't one, he pulled up the news, headlines flashing in black and white. 26-year-old founder sells health app for $150 million. His face went slack. My mother's eyes watered. "Why didn't you tell us?" she whispered. I exhaled, a laugh barely contained. "Like you ever told me anything about yourself, or kept anything for me? You saved it all for Alex." I laid out everything, the private schools, the trips, the failed startup you funded, the birthdays you ignored. She stammered. "That's not fair. We did our best. We supported you. We always." "No, Mom," I cut in. "You supported him. You built everything around him. You told me I'd be fine and acted like that meant you didn't have to try. I built my life without a single one of those things. You don't get to be the victim now." Alex slammed his fist on the table. "So what? You think you're better than us now? Money doesn't make you special. You're still the same weird little sister who ate alone and hid in her room. You just got lucky." I stood, napkin falling to the floor. My hand steady. Heart calm. Luck didn't code this app. Luck didn't answer customer emails at 3 a.m. Luck didn't turn down $50 million for the wrong reasons. Luck didn't clean up your messes, Alex. Mom did. Over and over. I looked at her, really looked. She looked small, defeated, like the foundation of her world had cracked. "You gambled on the wrong child," I said softly. "And now you're angry that the one you ignored learned how to win without you." She reached for my wrist. "Emma, wait. We can fix this. Help Alex. Invest. We're family." I slid my phone into my pocket. "I did stick together," I said quietly. "For years. You just never noticed." I pushed back my chair. Christmas lights blinked lazily behind them, reflecting off their stunned faces. "Enjoy dinner," I added. "Merry Christmas." And I walked out, leaving decades of invisibility, the hierarchy she built, and their shock behind me. The fallout wasn't instant. It unfolded slowly, like a quiet implosion. Texts from my mother the next morning, rambling apologies tangled with accusations. Alex calling hours later, furious and ungrateful. 2 days later, a letter from a lawyer demanding $3 million for support and upbringing. I handed it to my attorney. The reply was cold, meticulous. Every expense traced for Alex. 0 for me. The threat of going public with the records made them retreat. Meanwhile, Alex unraveled. Anger, alcohol, missed work, a viral meltdown caught on a customer's phone. His startup failed again. Credit card debt piled up. My mother tried to save him as always, refinancing the house, throwing money into the void. Nothing worked. Within a year, the house was gone. She moved to a small apartment. Health declined. Extended family pulled away. That next Christmas, I was in Hawaii, friends from the tech world around me, looking over the ocean. I wired a donation to a nonprofit supporting women's mental health. A younger cousin messaged, saying my story gave her courage. I became the mentor I wished I'd had at 16. Months later, a handwritten letter arrived from my mother. She apologized, finally. For favoring Alex. For overlooking me. For throwing away years. I read it once, then again. I didn't frame it. I didn't burn it. I put it in a drawer. I'd already forgiven myself. I didn't send money. I didn't rush to fix them. Boundaries were the only way to protect myself. I poured my energy into my company, focusing on mental health, building tools that actually helped people check in with themselves. I shared pieces of my story at conferences, in talks, not to boast, but as a cautionary tale about what happens when a family builds a world around a golden child and treats another like a backup. Here's the truth I hope stays with you: your value isn't measured by applause, gifts, or recognition from those who can't see you. Sometimes the most loving act is walking away, building your own life, and seeing yourself clearly. Favoritism harms both the ignored and the spoiled. My mom lost her house. Alex lost his safety net. I lost the fantasy they'd ever see me. In exchange, I gained something better, a life I built on my terms, full of people who show up. If you've ever been invisible, the overlooked child, maybe you don't have millions. Maybe there's no headline. But you do have a choice: keep waiting to be seen, or start seeing yourself. And if you were in my place, how would you walk out of that dinner?